Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paul's Body Engineering Podcast. I'm running solo once again, another week, another great topic, and that is conversations with coaches that can be triggering. And when I say triggering, and the reason I brought this topic up is because I have these often, and it's not so much I go out of my way to trigger a client, but often you have to have a tough conversation with a client that produces better results because either they're not aware or they are aware and they refuse to do something or just are ignoring the fact that they need to make a change. And this comes down to obviously the honest and tough conversations that you have on a week-to-week basis based around the relationship you develop. So, this happens from time to time with me and my clients, and this is why, an individual will approach a coach to help them because they're stuck. They're stuck in terms of what they need to do. They're stuck in terms of learning. They're stuck in terms of progressing. They're stuck in terms of a weight loss goal. And, let's call it 50% of the time, it's more about learning more. But the other 50% of the time, it's actually getting uncomfortable and realizing that you need to do something different because what you've done previously has clearly not worked, or it's only gotten you to a certain point. I believe it was Einstein that said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. And this is no different. We don't want the same result. We want a better result. We want an improved result. We want a result that's going to, make you shout to the moon and back because you're so ecstatic with it. But often that comes at a price, and that price is sacrifice, that price is discomfort, that price is tough conversations. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about having that tough conversation. And it could be something as simple as, I remember having a conversation with a former client once about their phone use in bed in particular. They were complaining about how tired they were, but they also acknowledged that they sit on their phone in bed way too late, and they're on there for an hour or two at night every single night, and it became an issue. But they acknowledged that they did it, but at the same time they almost, without saying the words "I refuse to," they refused to change. So it was clearly a bad habit that they'd gotten into, and it was a dependency that they basically wanted to do, even though I was certainly of the opinion that it was significantly impacting their sleep because they'd wake up the next day, they'd feel tired, they weren't necessarily progressing as much as they would, they were disappointed in their results, and a lot of it could be stemmed back, if you join the dots, stemmed back to the fact that their sleep was poor. So when you have a poor night's sleep, as we all know, and this is not new information, as we all know, when you have a poor night's sleep, you're tired, okay? You're fatigued. You don't think as clearly. You're more emotional. You're more irritable. You make poorer decisions around food. You don't train as hard. You don't recover as well. And if you're doing that every single night, those are the outcomes that you're facing the very next day. And that can compound over the course of a week, 2 weeks, a month. So no wonder you're not going to get the results that you want, or no wonder you're not getting to the results that you want. You may have achieved some results, but not all the results. And sometimes we have to have the tough conversation. So I did that with them, but it didn't necessarily go down as well as I would have liked. And it wasn't a case of me being an asshole, or I don't speak like that. It was more a case of just being direct, being honest, being transparent, and obviously giving them a genuine appraisal of where the situation sat and what I believed could fix it. And I honestly believe that could fix it. And look, they did make some attempts in this particular example. They did make some attempts to stop use of the phone. But as we know, if you're to break a bad habit and develop some good ones, it takes consistency, it takes discipline, and it takes patience, and it takes time. And they weren't prepared to put in that time. They fell back into old habits only after a couple of days, and lo and behold, everything just sort of spiraled back to where it was before. So, and that's just one example. There are plenty. Often, you can have a conversation with someone about how hard they're training and the fact that they need to train harder. And that is evident through watching video, watching them face to face, not seeing their numbers progress, understanding that there may be some limitations, but there also may be just some mental barriers that they're not overcoming. And it's a simple case that they need to push through them. But they believe they've hit their ceiling. They believe they don't have anything more. And that is, again, a tough conversation because the client is of the opinion that they don't have any more to give. The coach is of the opinion that they do have more to give. But you've got to make them see reason. You've got to also make them understand that there is more there. It's just a matter of them believing it, and often they don't. But they also push back, and that's the other thing. Like, there's always going to be resistance with these conversations, because if you've been doing something the same way over and over again, and you're so used to it, you're comfortable, you don't want change. But when you're told, well, you need to do it this way, which is completely different to what you're used to, you will get your back up. You will show resistance. You will not like what is being told to you. Therefore, you are triggered. But if you sit in that moment and actually go, okay, I'm paying this person for them to give me professional advice, right? This is what they've acknowledged will get me better. This is what they've identified that will improve me. If I actually take this on board, remove the resistance, and just get a little bit uncomfortable for a period of time, I may actually see some significant results. And I've experienced this firsthand plenty of times. Learning how to train hard was one of the crowning glories of my bodybuilding career, because before that I would just sort of flounder in the gym. I'd do a heap of chest, bit of shoulders, heap of biceps. And it wasn't a case of my exercise selection, it's just that I had no idea how to train hard and train past that level of discomfort. And really put my body under tremendous stress and stimulus to create growth, and that's how I won a pro card, by getting to those points of discomfort. But often people don't know that, because you can say it, it's just words at the end of the day, until you can actually physically show them or actually make them understand where that sits and where that lies, and they need to remove that resistance so that they can go all in. It's sometimes a tough conversation to have. So yeah, look, triggering conversations are part and parcel of the job, and they're more common than you realise. But in order to embrace change, people have to be open-minded. They have to be willing to accept some change that they may not be comfortable with, they may not want to necessarily do. And training hard is perfectly one of them. A lot of people are fearful of that discomfort that they physically feel. Other things are motivation. That's a common one, right? We often talk about being motivated and not being motivated, and being disciplined and not being disciplined. But clients often say they'll wait to feel motivated, yet that may never come, or it might be few and far between. So going to the gym on non-motivating days is something that you need to be told to do sometimes, because if you truly want results, if you truly want to get some consistency into your weeks and into your months and the years ahead, you've got to just make yourself go. And if it's a case that you have to have a tough conversation with a coach or a partner or a trainer or whoever to tell you to get off your backside and go to the gym, well, they're doing it with your best interest at heart. That's the honest truth. It's not a case that they're trying to, again, be an asshole. They're actually going, hang on, I've seen this before, I know what's going on here, you've just got to step up. So look, things like that are very common, right? Very, very common in terms of conversation. Diet's another one. People are often reluctant to acknowledge that their weekends aren't anywhere near as good as their weekdays. Maybe they drink too much, and again, they're not prepared to acknowledge the fact that they're drinking too much, because it's a bit of a taboo topic and they're ashamed of it. So they won't acknowledge that in a check-in, they won't acknowledge that in a conversation. But trust me when I say it, when you get to my point of a career where you've been doing this a long time, you get pretty good at reading people's behaviours, their body language, even just the subtleties of how they write stuff. You can understand and get a good grasp on things, and you can really get to the depths of an issue. So even though it's not necessarily put down word for word or it's said directly, I can generally figure out, there is a key issue at play here and that it needs to be addressed. One thing that does come up often is consistency, right? We talk about this ad nauseum to the point where you get red in the face and get sick of talking about it, to be honest. It's one of the most overly used words in the health and fitness industry, but it is so relevant. That is the thing. And I've read a quote that is so succinct in terms of getting to the bottom of a consistent lifestyle. And it's more about a question to the individual, and that is, if you tracked your consistency honestly, what percentage would it be? Now, if I put that to you, or if I put that to a client, most of them are going to say, 80%, 90%, 85%, 9 out of 10. But if you then actually went through the exercise and tracked everything to show where it actually sat in real time with real data, I guarantee you, it's going to be more likely to be 60 or 70%. Simply because people don't want to disclose where they're failing, where they're faulting, where they're not doing what they have said they're doing. And this is human nature. It is human nature that is the case. So, having that tough conversation, because often you'll look at someone's data, you'll look at someone's check-in information, you'll look at someone's results, and it just doesn't add up. There's something missing, right? And then you've obviously got to put the question back on them and have that tough conversation. And straight away, people will go, no, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing everything right. They get their back up. And again, this is not an attack on the individual by any means. This is not an attack on a client. This is not a specific example. And sometimes people have done everything and they're just not seeing a result, and there could be an underlying issue or something that's been overlooked. But more often than not, it's a case that they're not completely disclosing everything. Like I said, the alcohol on the weekend, the occasional glass of wine at night, maybe snacking after dinner. I remember having a conversation with someone ages ago, a really well-respected coach in the industry. I was at a seminar and she was telling me about a subtle leak that had crept into her week that she hadn't disclosed to a coach, but she also was subconsciously not aware that she was doing it. And it was something along the lines of she had 2 young boys and she'd take them to like a bakery on a Saturday after sport or something and buy them, whatever they wanted after their sport. And then she would innocently but knowingly have a bite of whatever they had. I think it might have been like a shortbread or something like that. And she was in a contest prep at the time, and the coach said to her, look, this is not adding up. There's something that we're missing here. And she got a backup going, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Everything is covered. I've tracked everything. I'm training really well. Everything is above board. Until one day it dawned on her, and it was in that moment where she actually went, oh my God, it's this biscuit. It's the biscuit that I'm having once a week that's causing, it might have been just the last couple of 100 grams that she needed to lose before getting on stage or whatever. This was over 10 years ago, so I'm sort of paraphrasing here a little bit. But it's simple things like that, that it was a tough conversation. She was assured that there was no issue. He was convinced that there was in terms of her coach. And when they dived a little bit deeper and actually, had the conversation and she went back through everything, it finally came to light. So these are the sorts of things that have to happen in order for you to succeed. If you want true progress, you've got to dive deep. You've got to look at everything. You can't just float around and assume you're doing okay. And, often people will say, I didn't track my vegetables, I eyeballed my meat, things like that, again, are fine from a lifestyle perspective, but it's also relevant to you as an individual that you need to accept that your progress is going to be slower. Okay? Because at the end of the day, it's not that difficult to track food. It's not that difficult to weigh food. We waste time all the time on social media, on Netflix. We waste so much time. So tracking your food is not an issue, and it shouldn't be a resistance issue, where you say, I don't want to track my food because it's obsessive or anything like that. That's complete and utter bullshit in my opinion. But if you are truly looking to have progress and you are truly looking to lose weight or get in better shape or just feel better, sometimes you've got to go to these lengths and you've got to make these sacrifices. And sometimes you've got to give up that glass of wine. You've got to give up the family meal on the weekend. You've got to give up the Friday night drinks after work with the boys or whatever it is, because it is holding you back. Rewarding yourself we're not a dog at the end of the day. We don't need to be rewarded by food or drink. That shouldn't be a thing. But the ironic thing is, in this conversation, in this topic, it's generally not a knowledge problem, right? Most people are aware of what they need to do better, because the education is everywhere. Social media is free, YouTube's free. You can Google stuff and look it up. You can chat GPT it now. There is stuff everywhere, and most of it is generally on point or close to, right? So you can learn enough to make progress. It's the accountability that people fall down on. They can't hold themselves to account 7 days a week, 52 weeks in the year. They just can't do it. And no one says you have to be that perfect. But again, I go back to the point about consistency. Out of 52 weeks, if you can be 47 weeks on, you're going to see results. It's as simple as that. But again, you've got to be held to account. And that's why a coach is so relevant and so important. So again, it's not about the knowledge. Most people already know that they should eat more protein. They should train consistently. They should sleep better. It's applying it every single day. And if nothing changed over the next 12 months, the question would be, would you be happy with where you are? And I'm sure sitting right now, listening to this, sitting in the position you're in, you look around and you go, well, no, I'm not happy. Well, then 12 months from now, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, as I said earlier, it's a definition of insanity because you're getting the same result. You're going to be in the same position in 12 months' time. So coaches can create a massive impact on an individual with slightly more complex planning, more complex programming. They ask better questions. They challenge the client's limiting beliefs. They help clients take ownership of their behaviours. And this, in the end, produces results. It's the conversations that are tough. It's the conversations that are remembered that often work out. They're the ones that make the difference. But you've got to be prepared to listen. You've got to be prepared to take the information on board. You've got to be prepared to remove that shell, that resistance shell, that barrier that's up. And you've got to be prepared for change. You know, that's the hindering thing here, is that change is often the most uncomfortable thing. And look, I'll be the first person to put my hand up and go, you know what, I hate change. As we get older, we get comfortable. We like our routine. We like our structures. We like how our things sort of look. And we're also a big advocate in the health and fitness industry of having structure and having routine, but it's got to be a good one. It can't be a bad one. If you're doing it and it's not necessarily bad, but it's holding you back, then subtle variations need to take effect. There needs to be some change for you to have change. Change doesn't happen without change. In order there to be change, there needs to be change. Now, that is obviously a very Chinese Confucius conundrum, but it is factual at the end of the day. So I guess what I'm saying here, and this all stemmed from a conversation this morning, which is why I wanted to sort of jump on today and put it down as a podcast and get it recorded, and that is, you've got to be prepared to have a triggering conversation. You've got to be prepared to listen. You've got to be prepared to take information on. You've got to be prepared to actually sit, absorb the information, don't react, and actually acknowledge the fact that maybe I need to do something as the individual that the coach has directed me to do better, to understand where I'm at and why I'm not progressing. And you know what? 6 months from now, if that change doesn't work, if that instruction doesn't work, well, guess what? You can go back to the coach and say, hey, you told me to do this. I did it exactly that. I've left no stone unturned, and yet I'm still here. And in that case, then it's going to be a tough conversation for the coach. But more often than not, if they're a well-educated coach, a well-experienced coach, very knowledgeable, they will give you direction that is generally for the best interest of both parties, and you should get a result. I know from my perspective that would be the case. So it is sometimes the harder conversations that are needed that will generate the best result. And I think that is a good position to finish on. So look, if you're, apprehensive about engaging a coach for that very reason, because they're going to bring up stuff that you don't want to talk about or you don't want to acknowledge, that probably then falls back on you to address that issue first. Maybe have some tough conversations with a family member, with a partner, maybe see a professional, a counsellor or a psychologist or something to unravel some of that first, because obviously, firstly, a coach is not, that's not within their scope to do that sort of mindset work. But secondly, it's really important that you enter a coaching relationship with an element of open-mindedness. You don't have to be completely open. You can be still closed off and apprehensive because, it's a brand new relationship. But at the same time, you've got to be prepared to open your mind to learn, to make change, get uncomfortable, and only then will you see progress. And I can guarantee you, I've seen it firsthand where individuals have been that resistant at the start in my tenure, and it may have been a couple of years down the track before they started to see progress, but they stuck with it, they dug deep, they took on change, they took on the feedback, and guess what? They're flourishing now. And I know everyone who listens to this and anyone who follows me on socials would know that they want to flourish. They want to live an optimal lifestyle where they're happy, they're healthy, they're energetic, they're training well, they're setting an amazing example for their kids, their partner finds them sexy. All these sorts of things can come off the back of you simply putting more effort in and making that change. All right, I'll finish up there. Thank you once again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe, of course, first and foremost if it's on Spotify, subscribe. If it's on Apple Music, subscribe. It's on a bunch of other podcast platforms as well, of course. If you're interested in any of my coaching services, please jump on paulsbodyengineering.com. You can either look through the services or you can just go to the Contact Me page and reach out. There's no obligation. There is some big news coming though in terms of my business. So if you are on the fence, I would be encouraging you to get on board very, very quickly, because there may not be a future opportunity to have a chat with me in regards to what we can do to help you. Otherwise, you can always email me, paul@paulsbodyengineering.com, or simply send me a DM on Instagram. But in the meantime, thank you once again for tuning in. It is very much appreciated. I know I rant and rave a little bit, as my wife would say, but in all honesty, sometimes, I just want to deliver a message with passion, and I think I do that. So I hope it isn't a rant or a rave, but I welcome any feedback as well. And with that in mind, I'm going to wrap it up there. So, as I say to every client every single day, have a great day.